I'll give you an introduction, which is your name and anything else to add to that introduction.
Yeah, a role you can say that SD2 or MTS like that.
Okay, right.
It's up to you.
Okay, thanks.
I think yeah, live it is showing 15 second to 16, right?
Yep. Guys, just 5 minutes remaining.
Okay.
We are all excited here.
Oh, thank you for the comment. I gave the full story without unmuting myself. So what I was saying is that this webinar is about introduction to the web development, where we'll basically give the premise of how to become a web developer, what technologies are involved in day-to-day life of a web developer, and what tools we use. Basically, how we enable ourselves to start on the path of web development. Okay, I will have more specific details coming on in the next webinars. This one will kind of act as a foundation for rest of the webinars in this series.
Yeah, well said, Sashi. So actually, we have planned series of 5 webinars. They will be like coming one after other. And so this sticks just to introduction of web development. Next will be front end technologies, then the live React app demonstration, and then back end technologies, and then some back end application demonstrations. So guys, just hop on. I think for a few more minutes. I think we're gonna start in few minutes. Okay.
So before that, any insights into what kind of people can join the session? Like from what background?
Yeah, so see, web development is the necessity today. If you see, irrespective of their computers, like branches, degrees, or whatever you do, even if you are not from engineering, whatever you do, MBA, BBA, whatever, you can like definitely jump today to learn all about web development because it's the necessity. Wherever you go. The first phase of any business is today at least is either a website or a full-fledged mobile app. So to build that or to maintain that, you have to learn these basics, fundamentals of web development. So yeah, it is pretty much open for everyone. Yeah.
I'd actually add to that, even if you're not actually developing the application for web, and you're just on business side of things, right? I believe it would help to understand what web development is about and how we go about doing it, right? Just so that you can enable everyone else in your team to come up with better ideas or such them better ideas on what kind of websites and what kind of technologies you want.
On that note, let's start with the session, sir.
So,
Good evening to all the eminent speakers and attentive listeners. I am Anirudh, your moderator for today. On the behalf of Script Dehradun, I welcome you all to the first day of what is going to be an enriching webinar on web development. As a team, it is our first step into a long journey for Script India Dehradun section. We hope that this webinar will enhance your knowledge and nourish you with the basics of web development, providing you an expertise in it too. So day one of this 5-day session is dedicated to the very basic introduction of web development. Now, I introduce you to the eminent speakers, Mr. Kapil Raghuvanshi and Mr. Sashi Sekhar. Experts in
Yeah.
their own field, they have worked for several organizations in the field of web development. Now, I'll pass on the stage to Kapil sir. Thank you.
Hey, good evening, everyone. I welcome you all once again to this series of 5 webinars on full stack web development. So today we are gonna talk about some introductory and fundamental parts of aspects of this web development. And soon after this, like we have four more enriching, full of learning sessions. In those sessions, we are gonna talk about more. Like we will bring more deeper insights of front end and back end technologies and some live mobile applications and their demonstrations as well. So in today's session, we talk about we'll share some basic fundamentals of web development. So today's highlights will be first we talk about what internet is and how this internet works. Uh, can you can you guys make it next slide? Yeah. So first of all, we are will look at how this internet is, what is the World Wide Web, and how it works, and what is the brief history of internet. Then we'll later see what are the latest surveys. If you see recent surveys, we are gonna show you about these technologies, like which technologies are in demand, which are more sought after technologies in today's world. Then we'll see some basics of how do we create web pages using HTML, CSS, and JavaScripts, and what these technologies actually are. And then we'll show you how any client can make requests to the web servers. This is a usual client server system. Then Shashi will take care of this, what actually is a web server, what are the responsibilities of web servers, and at the end we will talk about what are the famous technology stacks in today's world, what are the tools which we use daily at our work, and then what's the general workplace process. When I was in my final years 5 years back, I was very curious to know about like how this actually works, because we know all these technologies we heard, but how it actually what is the actual workplace process. So I'm gonna share you that at the end, like we'll discuss about some preparation and study tips, and then later what are the most famous, and everywhere if you go, whatever like MNCs or tech giants, you're like sure that these questions definitely the recruiters will ask. So we'll discuss some interview questions as well, and then we'll go ahead with a live Q&A. So let's directly jump to the first slide. It says how internet works. So to explain this internet process, let me give you one analogy which will be easy for you guys to understand. Suppose whenever you open any browser on your mobile application or browse, you go to Chrome. So what you see for the first time is like you type in the search engine, right? Suppose you go to Google and you search like www.facebook.com. What happens after that? What are the series of steps like followed by that? And at the end you see that response, that Facebook login page or the home page coming up. So to understand that in more detail, this analogy says that okay, consider you are as the client. Suppose it can be your mobile app or the browser, and it is your house. Okay, you sit in your home. Now if you want to get some data from the internet, okay, let's say some shop or nearby shopping market. So just consider it as a server. Okay, you are client, the browser, and the server is some nearby supermarket shop. Then you need to have you need to know the shop address before, right? Suppose you want to buy Maggie, you would like to start from your home. Okay, there has to be some street, the path, there has to be some carrier, there has to be some language which you communicate with that shopkeeper, and there has to be some address, right? So suppose you want a packet of Maggie, you need to know the shop address. So that shop address is actually a DNS. Those DNS servers are domain naming servers. These are special servers which keeps respective IP address corresponding to their DNS values. DNS values is like, suppose you write facebook.com. So this is a domain, and why they use this text word, because it is easy to remember. If I say that, okay, 32.192.192.168, this will be definitely hard to recall, right, for everyone. So then they have this domain names. So shop address you will get from the DNS servers. They keep these values, corresponding IP address values from the domains. Then okay, if you start from your home, how you will go? So that way the street is the internet, the World Wide Web, if you know. World Wide Web is just a collection of computers. Those computers act as a different purpose for them. Suppose few are acting as a client, few are just acting as a routers. They just pass information from one side to another side. So like that, you need the internet. Third one, suppose you started from your home, you know the shop address, you started on the street with your carrier, suppose bike. So that bike is, you can consider it as a TCP IP transmission, this control protocol and then internet protocol. It acts in the networking layer of OSI model. I hope you know little about the OSI model. So you set on your bike, you started towards your shop. Then okay, you reach the shop, but how will you communicate with that shopkeeper? Suppose it's, if it is in your native, you might know the language, but what about suppose you go to city of Paris and you know, don't know French, then the language is also essential. So that language here is HTTP, hypertext transfer protocol. So whatever you communicate with your server, this is in terms in request and response. So you, if you ask for the Maggie packet, this is a request which will be in terms of HTTP, and that's why you just mention HTTP and HTTPS before writing any address on the web search bar. So if you go with this analogy, we'll get to know that how this all process works, right? Whole idea is set up on the, like on the basis of this, that you have to know the address, what in response you will request for some suppose here you will you went for some Maggie packet, right? So that data will you get in response, it is in chunks of HTML, CSS, or suppose you want PDF from web, right? You download PDF, Excel files from the websites. So it all comes under the data packets. So that's all for the analogy part. Next, it's all about World Wide Web. So I would like to request Mr. Shashi to take care of this slides. Yeah.
Sure, Kapil. Thank you so much. So, World Wide Web, or web as it's more commonly known as, is an information system basically built on top of internet. And one thing to highlight is that internet existed way before World Wide Web was even conceptualized. Internet is technology from around 1965. ARPANET is when it all started. But before World Wide Web, right, and why we are talking specifically about web development is because web kind of revolutionized the internet. Before World Wide Web, the internet existed, but it was like all the, as Kapil said, right, internet is a collection of computers. But all the computers on internet kind of spoke a different language. Each one of them was speaking in their own specific language, right? Some of them could be speaking English, some of them Hindi or Tamil. I'm just naming these real languages that we know of, that we hear of every day, right? But obviously, there were other languages created for machine-to-machine communication. The point was, not everyone, not every computer spoke the same language, so they could not talk to each other effectively, right? One analogy that you could think of is, imagine placing a call to a phone number, right? You have the phone number and you place the call, the other person picks up, and imagine they say, "Hola, ¿cómo estás?" Now, unless you know Spanish, you would not be able to communicate with them. You're connected, you're absolutely connected to them, but there is no effective communication that you can establish at this point, right? What this meant is that internet kind of became a elite tool. It was like, depending on where you were in world, what kind of computer you have, what kind of connection to internet you have, what we call as quality of service, QoS. What kind of internet connection you had, that dictated what you could consume from internet, what kind of information you could access on internet, and what other information which is available on internet, but simply because you don't have the right tools, you don't have the right software, you could simply not access that, right? Can we go? Can we press next? Okay. So, Sir Tim Berners-Lee, he's the person who came up with the idea of this internet. What he wanted to do was just create an open and equal system for anyone to be able to consume information on internet, right? And his idea of internet, or his version of internet, which eventually became known as World Wide Web, right, was that we'll have interconnected, interlinked web of documents and audio visual information and PDFs and drafts and whatnot, right? dispersed all throughout the world, and anyone who wanted to access that should be able to access that. That was the only limitation that he placed upon himself when creating this World Wide Web, right? Um, Finally, the product that we got right was universal, it was open, and it was equal. What that means is that anyone in world having an internet connection, regardless of what kind of internet connection they have, right? Whether they have a slow 2G connection or a fast 4G connection or a broadband connection, they will be able to consume content on the internet, right? And the content can itself be of different types, documents, images, and video and audio. We all take that for granted today, but at that time it was a revolutionizing technology. Can we go to next? Yeah. Okay. So what exactly Sir Tim Berners-Lee came up with, right? What technologies he created for setting up this World Wide Web on top of internet? The first one was HTTP. This is something that Kapil mentioned on the previous slide, right? It is a language for computers to communicate with each other, right? HTTP is the language that your computer uses to talk to Facebook's computers or Google's computers or whatever website you are trying to go to, right? HTTP language will be used for machine-to-machine communication, right? But final aim is not to communicate between machines. It could be the aim in some scenarios, but more common example would be communicating between machine and humans. Like when you are going to Facebook.com, you are basically expecting Facebook servers to communicate with you, and you be able to communicate back with Facebook servers, right? To bridge this gap, right? Bridge this gap between humans and machines, a special tool called browser was created, right? Browser kind of acts as the portal to internet for you. It acts as the bridge between us, the humans, and machines that are dispersed throughout the world and connected to internet, right? Now, browsers have two layered job. Their first job is communicating with other machines on internet, and second job is communicating with humans, right? And for this second part of job, right, there was a separate language created called HTML, right? Hypertext Markup Language. This HTML language is a language for creating documents, just the way you'd have already created documents in MS Word, for example, right? Or PDF or so many other formats that exist in world today. HTML was one common uniform language in which everyone who was going to use web was supposed to create the content. This is we are talking about this in 1989. At that time, video and audio were not that prevalent because broadband speeds used to be in kbps, not in mbps and gbps that we have today. So the main use for web at that time was for viewing documents, for reading news and such, right? So HTML was the uniform language in which anyone could write content and anyone else on internet could consume it, could view it without thinking about what software they'll need to view the same content, view the content properly, what version of software they'll need. All this completely became moot because of just these three technologies: HTTP, browser, and HTML. Right? Can we go to the next slide? Okay. Now, before we jump into details about these technologies that we have, right? I'll just quickly cover where World Wide Web is used. Whatever Sir Tim Berners-Lee created in 1989, right? Where do we use it today? Now, these two that are displayed on your screen, right? The web browser and the mobile devices, you'd most probably already know about that. You'd have, like, from context, you'd have figured out that, yeah, World Wide Web is used on browsers and it's used in mobile. It could be a browser in mobile, or it could be a mobile application, native mobile application itself, right? It's used in these two places for sure. But that's not all. There are other places where the same technologies are used. Can you press next? Okay. How about smartwatches or smart TV or even normal TV, right? Web development enables you to communicate with user or interact with users using these extra means of communication. Smartwatches could be, if you want to notify your user about something very, very urgent, right? They might not be on their browser, they might not be on their mobile might be in pocket, but their watch is always on their hand. You could just send a notification to the watch that they will immediately consume, right? Same way, smart TVs could be used in consuming content very much in context. When they are viewing an ad about something, you could give them more information about that just by using web technologies, right? You don't need to learn any other technology apart from this HTML, CSS, and JS that we'll talk about in this webinar as well as in the subsequent webinars, right? You don't need any other technology for making deployable applications for all these mediums. And we press next. Okay. Apart from that, I'd also like to highlight where else the same web technologies are used today, right? And this is to give you an idea of breadth of the scope these technologies are used for. Just to give you an idea of what else you could target when after you have learned all these technologies, right? What you could target to achieve, or what you could target to make better in your users' lives. And your home is the first thing that comes to your mind. It comes to my mind. Think about it. With smart technologies available in our home today, right? Be it Alexa, smart assistant, or Google Assistant, which is basically the same thing, or smart lights, or smart fridges that can basically figure out that you're running low on milk and order the milk for you. All this could be achieved by using web technologies. Cars, well, that's not very popular in India today, but it's catching up very quickly. Tesla, for example, could deploy update to your car while your car is resting in your garage without you ever going to a service center, right? It makes life so much easier for car owners. Money, again, you have absolutely used that. You have used credit card, you have used UPI in India, or if you're not in India, then also PayPal or Paytm, or there are so many other places where money has been completely digitalized. From your salary getting deposited into your bank, and you spending your salary on you're spending your money on buying things, or giving it as a short-term loan to your friends, or spending it on anything else you need. You absolutely do not need to touch cash today. If you don't want to, you don't have to. Money has completely been revolutionized and digitized using web technologies. And shopping cart, I added as an extra over here. Now, when I put shopping, right, you immediately connect with Amazon or Flipkart or something like that, right? But that's not what I wanted to highlight. What I wanted to highlight that even apart from these online shopping sites, web technologies have revolutionized the way we do shopping. For example, when you go to a superstore, nowadays you don't expect your store owner to manually find out the prices or look up the prices in a directory in a book basically, and then do the sum by hand, right? Find the actual amount by hand. They have computers, they scan the barcode and the price is immediately listed. Nothing else required. The bill is immediately generated. The totals is always correct. You can be sure that if it was generated by a computer, the total will be correct. You won't be paying, you won't be overcharged or you won't be undercharged, right? So shopping has it's another field where web technologies have completely revolutionized how we do business, right? And all these things that I highlighted are basically examples. Web technologies have affected every single field that we interact with, that we do business with in our life. These are the examples that I wanted to highlight just to show you how wide the application of web technologies goes. Once you have learned all this, you'll be able to touch your or improve your user's life in so many different manners.
Absolutely.
Right? So before we start with the technologies, right? One last point that I would like to add is the evolution of web. How web had changed since it was started in 1989. So in 89, HTML, HTTP, and browsers were the only technologies. Server is something that I didn't mention over here, but server was also created soon after. So in 1989, these things were created. If you know a little bit of web development, right, you quickly see that JavaScript and CSS is missing from the list in 1989. That is because JavaScript and CSS were created much, much later. At that time, as I highlighted, the aim was to just create a uniform language for servers or different computers to communicate with humans all across the world. That's it, right? But eventually we realized that the experience of a user on internet could be much, much rich, much, much more advanced if we add extra technologies. And it was not done over a day, right? You see, there's a 6 years gap between the next big thing that happened on internet. And it was not just one person that came up with this idea that the experience could be enhanced further, right? Multiple people came up with the same idea. And that actually created a slight problem. So if you see, right, in 1995, JavaScript and Java were two contending technologies that came into view, right? Both of them kind of intended to do the same thing. They wanted to make the experience more dynamic. Instead of just text being visible in your browser, they wanted it to be more interactive. For example, animations, or for example, moving text on your screen that we kind of take for granted today, right? Scrolling text on the screen. All that was not possible before JavaScript or Java came into picture. Now, JavaScript was a clear winner over here. Finally, we started with JavaScript, and uh, Java was used for some other things. Java became a server-side technologies instead of browser technologies. But these two were not the only ones. Apart from that, there was another one called ActiveX, which didn't pick up much, but it caused a lot of issues. Again, I'd like to highlight that because from 1995 till 2002, JavaScript was developing very rapidly. We were adding more and more features to JavaScript to make the experience more and more rich. But because of ActiveX and because of different views that were present in the market at that time, right? It kind of led to contention. Everyone had their own vision. Every company that was involved in this business, right? They had their own vision of what the next big thing should look like. Microsoft created ActiveX, and they wanted JavaScript to take their vision, take the route that they envisioned for ActiveX. JavaScript itself was created by a company called Netscape. They had their own vision, obviously, right? What this led to, all these big players fighting with each other, what this led to is once again bifurcated internet. You could write a program in JavaScript and it would not run in all browsers. One program, like program written certain way, will run in Netscape maybe or Mozilla maybe, but not run in Safari or Internet Explorer. And this again caused a lot of problem. It took a lot of time to sort this mess out. Till 2005, no one could even agree to talk to each other. And in 2005, after they agreed, it took them another 4 years to decide what is the minimum viable product that we can agree on, that everyone could agree on, right? So from around 2002 till 2009, it was kind of a dark period for web. And why I'm bringing this up, that doesn't exist anymore. You could be sure that everyone is aligned and everyone is going in the right direction now. But why I'm bringing this up is that the next generation of web developers should be aware of our history, aware of where we come from, so that we don't end up in the same situation again. We don't end up repeating the problems, facing the same problems again, right? So yeah, that's about JavaScript. JavaScript is de facto standard for client-side programming inside browsers today. Java and every other technologies that came up with it kind of has faded or moved on to something else. It has been repositioned in market, so it's it. Along with that, CSS is something that Kapil will talk shortly about. CSS is for styling or more fine-grained control over styling our web pages. HTML5 is the successor of HTML that was originally created by Tim Berners-Lee. HTML5 basically empowers us to create more modern websites, more 21st century looking websites, so to say. And today, HTML5 is a de facto standard, and by default, when someone says HTML, they mean HTML5, the latest iteration of HTML. Right. With that, I'll stop and I'll hand over control back to Kapil to take on from the next slide.
Sure, yeah. Thank you, Shashi. So, guys, yeah, it's all about World Wide Web, what exactly is internet and how it works, and the history and the brief evaluation of the technologies behind World Wide Web. So now let's talk about the technologies. What are the web technologies? So before that, I just put these surveys. So to show you guys that what are the technologies which are latest and which are most sought after today. So if you see this Stack Overflow's survey, it's a recent survey 2020 in the category of programming, script and markup languages. You see JavaScript tops the chart, and it's not only this year, it's like it's the eighth year in a row JavaScript has maintained its first position among all these programming languages. So the reason is simple, because it is the only language which our browsers and internet understands. Even if you know Java or Python, they can create like you can create all the components and modules, but at the end, and it has to be converted or compiled back to JavaScript, because that is the only language which our browser will understand. So and after that you see HTML and CSS, and then SQL, and then Python. So this is the chart, all if you see TypeScript, which is a superset of JavaScript maintained by Microsoft, it is also gaining popularity. And nowadays if you see the Angular 2, which when they launched in 2016, they made TypeScript as the only language to use within Angular. Earlier it was JavaScript, but if you see the evaluation of JavaScript, in 2010, before 2010, it was just for client side. But when Node.js was developed by Randall, then it became the server side language as well. And in the last one decade, it gained so much of popularity, and in front end, back end, everywhere. Today if you see, JavaScript can be used. And most of the developers, they don't want to use any other language, because if you know JavaScript, you can definitely become a full stack developer. You can develop front end, back end. And now if you know the NoSQL databases like MongoDB, Amazon DynamoDB, they all accept JSON form of data. So if you know one language, you need not to learn other languages or syntax. Just JavaScript will work across the platform, across the tech stacks. Next, if we go to another survey, this is in category of web frameworks. So what exactly is web framework? Web framework is a software framework which allows or which supports you to develop web applications over using these HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. But they gives so many libraries, packages inbuilt inside that framework, which will help you to write code easily. You can write your code, you can test your code easily, you can deploy the code. So all these things your frameworks take care. Suppose we talk about Angular and React. These two frameworks are very popular in today's world. If you see, almost all MNCs are working on Angular, and if you see all tech giants, they are definitely be using React some way or the other. So if you see this survey in the category of web frameworks, jQuery is number one. But if you see second and third, you can see the React JS and Angular, because these are latest technology. If you see Angular 2, this Angular, which we call, it's launched in 2016. So in just 4 years of a span, you can see it got the third position. And the React JS is, I think, in just 5-6 years, it reaches to the second position. So these two frameworks are very popular for web development today. If you know these frameworks, you can definitely apply for any web development or related job to anywhere. Anyways, see, React.js is not actually the complete framework. It's just a front-end library like jQuery was. jQuery was very popular, and since these at the time it was so popular, and so many companies have developed projects based on that, it is still used, because they are not able to migrate complete product. If you say that Google search, or if you say facebook.com or amazon.com, it is very hard to completely migrate to newer technologies, because every 5 and 6 years, if you see, latest frameworks are coming. They are more fast, they are more dynamic, they give more easy components and libraries to the developers. So these are like Angular JS, if you can see, and jQuery, these are the legacy. But apart from this React and Angular, if you see Express is another web framework which is built over JavaScript, and which runs over Node environment. So this is again very famous and popular most of the time for the backend APIs. but you can also definitely in the response you can send back HTML using pug. I hope you're aware about little aware about server side rendering, or you can go to web and you can search what is client side rendering or server side rendering. And now we have another type like isomorphic rendering as well, in which like you can use the same language in both front end and back end. So if you take example of my company, like I work in Epsilon, so in my project we use only JavaScript. Either it is in front end we use Angular, or in back end we use Express and Node.js. And the database also, if you use NoSQL, you can the JavaScript and the JSON format works pretty well. So next slide. Okay, now let's talk about in detail what exactly is HTML, what exactly is CSS and JavaScript. So as already mentioned by Shashi, that these are the basic three pillars of web development. Whatever advancement came to these technologies, but the basic fundamentals are still the same. HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. If you know these three technologies, you can learn any framework over these. If you know JavaScript pretty well, the fundamentals, you can definitely learn React.js, Angular, Vue, or whatever frameworks are popular in today's world. So the first thing is HTML. What exactly is HTML? HTML is hypertext markup languages. So it's a type of a language. See, you know these languages which is very popular, right? Which is Java, JavaScript, Python, right? They are programming languages. You know English, French, Hindi. These languages are speaking languages. In the this same category, if you see, few languages are markup languages. Let me give you examples. Suppose you know XML, right? You know XHTML. These all are markup languages. So what do you mean by markups? Markups is actually a tag, you can say. They are some standard designated tag by every languages. HTML has its own. So these tag, if you write in your web page, right, it tells these all these tags and elements, these tell the browser how to display the content. Suppose if you use the body tag or if you use the image tag, it tells the browser, okay, now you have to show image in this block or in this div, like that. So these all are for some special purpose, if you see. And it has been, I think, 30 years when HTML the first version got launched. But now if you see today, HTML5 is the latest version, and it brings so many new functionalities, capabilities which were not there previously, to make your web pages more and more dynamic. If you see, it brought geolocation API as well. And if you see the cache, the web storage, there are types of like session storage, local storage, and so many functionalities. If you go to any website or like W3C school, you can go and learn all these features. Today we just talk about the introduction part of it, what exactly is HTML and where it gets used. Now if you see what is CSS. Now let me take you to the next slide. What exactly is CSS? So it's the second basic pillar of web development. It is like cascading style sheets. So what exactly is style sheets? So if you say, it's another type of languages, we have style sheet languages. These languages, or if you write any code or tags in that, here we call them as selectors instead of tags, what we used to call in HTML. So if you use any selector on particular div or particular HTML element, it used to design them. So mainly CSS is used for the presentation of your web page or web document. Now if you talk about the types of CSS, we have various like inline, internal, external. Inline CSS is like when you just write in the HTML tag using style attribute, or if you add your CSS in the same page, the same HTML page, it is called as the internal. And if you use external slideshow, like it's a different file by having like .css extension, then it is called as the external. So these are just three different behavior of using CSS. So if you consider, let us talk about some analogy. If you see the human body, right, the whole skeleton, if you see by bones, this is just an HTML, all the bones. If you add the skin part of your human body, right, then it becomes HTML plus CSS. I think you might have seen so many memes which are building up, right, this HTML and with HTML plus CSS, if you go to social media. So CSS more or less is for appearance, for the presentation part of web page, the layout, And that's it. And now we have SCSS. You might have heard of SAS and LESS. So these two new technologies are the preprocessor. CSS preprocessor. What does it do is like they gives you more freedom to, suppose you can add you can create your own variables which you can't do in CSS. You can make use of inheritance. You can make mix-in functions or reusable functions in SCSS or LESS. At the end it has to be CSS because the browser understands only CSS. So these just are the preprocessors which gives you more and more capability so that you can make your website more like styled and rich of functionalities. Okay, next we will talk about the third and the most important pillar of web development, which is JavaScript. So JavaScript is initially launched as JScript. The name was JScript, but at the time, I think around 1994, Java was the language which is very popular. So the developers of this JScript, these guys thought that why don't we name it JavaScript, just to gain the popularity of Java, because it was very famous at that time in the server side world. So that is how about the naming conventions. But if you forget about that, JavaScript is totally different than Java. You can't compare at all. These is different, totally different programming languages. That is, if you see, it's lightweight, it's interpreted, or nowadays like more advancement has been received by JavaScript. So they are now like JIT compiled. If you use Angular, we have AOT compiler, ahead of time compiler. So basically, JavaScript is used in web development to add interactivity to a website. Suppose if the same human body with skin and bones, if I take the example, if you move your hand, right, how these muscles work, who ask these muscles to move? That is what the role of JavaScript in that example. So suppose if you click button, if you open any model, if you share anything, like whatever you do in website, this is all purely JavaScript. Even if somebody says that okay, I have developed it in React, Angular, Vue, Python, Ruby, whatever languages, irrespective of languages, frameworks, at the end they all convert it to the JavaScript so that the browser can understand and show that functionalities. Then why JavaScript so popular? Because see, if you use Java for web development or Python, that what to say, that conversion needs to be there, right? So most of the time they use babel.js and other JavaScript frameworks to convert this. But why don't we just learn vanilla JavaScript and write whatever functions we want? It will be difficult for web developers for a big large real-time applications. But if you know pure basic JavaScript, I can assure you that you can learn any frameworks which is built over JavaScript. Now let's talk about ECMAScript. What exactly is ECMAScript? You might have heard somewhere about ES6, ES7, or ES something like that. So ECMA is an association. It's like European Computer Manufacturing Association. So ECMAScript, what it takes care of JavaScripts, like so like if like the way we are proceeding into the future, right? 30 years back, if you see, there were no dynamic websites. You can't find animations in the website. Now you can click on the Google Maps, kind of more advanced topic, you can like more advanced concepts you can integrate to your websites. So this is all has been managed and maintained by ECMAScript. So every year they promise to bring up with the new functions. So current is ECMAScript 2020. Next year they will come up with ECMAScript 2021. They will surely bring new more features. Yeah, so that is all about what exactly is JavaScript. Now next, now let's talk about how do we communicate. As I told you in the beginning and the first analogy, that how client makes request to the servers, right? So if you are in the pure JavaScript provides this fetch API. This API is based on, like, it uses HTTP, and it is meant for requesting and responses purpose. So if you use fetch API, right, it has its own global method fetch. So you can, as you can see in the example here, if you use this fetch method, you can write that whatever your endpoints, suppose you are getting data from some backend endpoints, suppose it can be anything, like, so you just need to mention that, and then that response you will get And if you want to convert that response into JSON, you can use a second line. And if you just want to print that data, what data you have received from the server, you can just go to the third line. It's just a silly example. So I was looking to tell you that how easy it is using JavaScript to communicate with the web server. Client is your own mobile browser or your Chrome, basically anywhere, any device if you use, maybe your smart watches or smart TV, anything. So all this act as a client, and you needs to make request to server. Web server is again any computer which is, maybe some big computer, like Google has their own computers. It's a set of computers which we call it as a server. They are kept distributed, and across the globe they have reach to. Now if you see this, this is the pure basics JS example. If you talk about Angular has, since I told you, it's a matured and fully functionalized framework. It has its own HTTP client module. When you learn about Angular, you will find that HTTP client module, it has its own methods. So it provides those methods to communicate with the server. And one more, my favorite library is Axios. If you go to npm and search for the Axios, it is my favorite library, because irrespective of the frameworks, the language, you can use it in Angular frontend, React frontend, or maybe Node.js if you need to communicate with the another endpoints built over another Node.js or Express micro services we call. At that time also you can Axios. It's very popular nowadays, and you can. It's pretty easy, and it gives so much functionality to to you to get all that response, the type of response, the headers you would like to send, every details it has accumulated within. So it's all about this, how do we make requests to our servers. Now let's talk about this web server. So I'll hand over this presentation again back to Shashi, who will present these slides about web servers. Yeah, Shashi, over to you.
So, thanks. All right. So we have already talked about a server a couple of times in this presentation. Let's just address the elephant in the room. What a web server is, and along with that, why do we need a web server at all? Okay, let's start with what a web server is. Okay, web server is a program. It's actually a dual meaning term. Web server is a program, that was the intention of the term web server. But nowadays, even the computer that runs a web server program could loosely be called a web server, right? So web server is a program or the actual hardware running such a program that can understand HTTP, and it can transmit web documents back to the client. Why do we need web server at all, right? If you think about it, if your browser needs to get a web document from somewhere, if your browser needs to display something to you, right, there has to be somewhere where that document has been kept. Like Facebook must have kept all its HTML files or frameworks and code and data somewhere on internet, from where your browser can go look up, ask server to give it your timelines, in case of Facebook, or in case of Gmail, your inbox, your emails. And after browser gets that information from the server, from the remote computer, let's call it, let's avoid the server term for a second. But effectively, browser basically connects to a remote computer. That's also a computer, simply similar to what you are using, a laptop or a mobile, sometimes more powerful. Your browser will connect to that. It will ask for the information that it needs, and server will respond in kind. It will respond with the information. Most probably, it will be in HTML format. It could also be video, audio, PDF, and anything else that your browser can display. Right. Just to enable this effective communication, effective data sharing, which was the aim of World Wide Web anyway, we need some computers perpetually connected to internet, being placed in worlds where the information can be placed for anyone to access. And we call such computers, and the program that actually does the communication running on that computer, as a web server. Right. So technically, your computer could be web server too if you wanted to. Your laptop could be web server. And as a matter of fact, I have a web server running right next to me right now. It's a simple Raspberry Pi that hosts some of my websites. But typically we do not do that. This was more of a learning exercise for me. Typically most people do not host a web server like this in their home for a variety of reasons. Most important of them would be you'd expect your web server to be running always, right? If Facebook wants anyone in world at any time to be able to access their timeline, right? They would not want to keep the Facebook web server running in the CEO's home, right? Because in that case, what if the power goes? What if the internet connection is lost? That happens every once in a while, right? The broadband connection is lost. You need so many backups to ensure that your web server is always connected to internet and it's always running. So again, even though your computer could act as a web server, typically when we say web server, we mean these large clusters of server, large clusters of computer, which are specifically designed for serving websites, serving HTML documents or audiovisual content on internet, right? Now, I think we have already talked about it multiple times, so I'll just mention it once and skip over this. Web server's job is simply to accept connection, accept HTTP requests from a browser or any other type of client, be it a smart device like your smart home or smart fridge or a browser, which would be the major use case, of course, and then process the request in some manner, give back the requested information. That requested information could again be HTML or just raw information that is used in some manner by the client, right? Can we go to next slide? Okay. On that note, let's dive into the responsibilities of web server. What a web server has to absolutely do to be called a web server, right? Web server has to accept input. It must speak HTTP. We did establish that, but over HTTP, it must be able to accept the input from the client, right? It must be able to process the request. It must be able to do some computation on the input, or it must be able to find the requested file if the client is requesting a file, or it must be able to query and assimilate the information that client is asking for, right? So basically process the request in some manner so that it reaches or it creates some useful information for the client to consume, right? And the third piece that a web server must do is output, right? It must be able to return the result back to the client in web document format, JSON or PDF. It could be multiple things, right? It must be able to return the information back to client in a format that client understands. Let's leave it at that, right? Now, if you have had any background in programming, you'd see that almost all programs that we write follow this exact same pattern. There is input, there is processing, and then there is output, right? And in that respect, web servers don't sound very special, do they? It's same input, process, output cycle for web servers too. And that I specifically put this, I specifically omitted the HTTP aspects of web server on this slide just to highlight that web servers are just programs. There is that special part that they can talk in HTTP, but that's not the important piece. The important piece is that it be able to do the processing, it be able to accept the input, do the processing to generate some useful information, and then return the output. The HTTP part is kind of an add-on to enable it to talk to clients over internet, and that can be added to existing programs too. You could write a program in C++ or Bash or whatever language you know of, right? A normal program, the same Hello World program that you write, and using some other programs, make that C++ program or whatever program you've written available over internet. Like you would be able to add the HTTP capabilities separately. And for a long time, we used to do that. For a long time, that was the standard way of deploying a web server using the Apache and PHP. That's the standard way today also for any PHP developer, right? They write normal program and then they put the program, they run the program in conjunction with a separate program called Apache. Apache does all the HTTP thing, HTTP magic, let's call it, accepting the input from remote computer, returning the output to remote computer. PHP, all it does, all it cares about is receiving the input in normal manner, processing it, and returning the output in normal manner, like any other program does, right? This also brings up interesting point, and that is, if the logical flow of a web server program is same as any other program, can we use any programming language for creating a web server? And the answer is yes. We can use any programming language for creating a web server, regardless of whether the programming language has the inbuilt capability of talking in HTTP or not. Most of the programming languages today will have that capability. You can rest assured about that any modern programming language has the capability of talking in HTTP, but that's not an absolute requirement for writing a program. And PHP is another thing that I'll highlight. PHP does not have, well, it does have an inbuilt server, but that's not very good. So PHP's inbuilt server is never used for actually making the PHP program available over internet. We use some other third-party tool for accepting the HTTP request, right? And PHP runs like a normal program. And in that manner, you actually end up with a plethora of choices. You could write a web server in Python, you could do it in Java, you could do it in C++, or so many other languages, right? Any other language that you know of, you could most probably write a web server in that language. The latest entrant on this front is JavaScript. Now, as Kapil pointed out, JavaScript was, and we also talked about that earlier in the webinar, right? JavaScript was created to be used as a programming language inside the browser. Some people have joined, Randall, as Kapil pointed out, basically wondered, to become a web developer, you need to learn at least two different languages, and if you count HTML and CSS as a language, then at least four different languages to become an effective web developer. You need to know HTML, you need to know CSS, you need to know JavaScript because that's the only language that will run inside your browser. And then to write the backend, to write the web server, you need to learn one more language, be it Java, be it Python, be it Go, C++, it doesn't matter. But at least one more language you'll need to learn. And they wondered, could we simplify this process? Could we make web more accessible to web developers by reducing this extra requirement of learning one extra language? And to that effect, they basically took JavaScript out of the browser. The web browsers were already written in such a manner that JavaScript could potentially be taken out. So it wasn't very difficult to take JavaScript out of the browser. The more challenging part was adding more functionalities to the JavaScript that they took out, right? So they took JavaScript out of the browser and they basically wrote a program that could run JavaScript code in normal terminal, just the way you write a hello world program in C++ or Java and run it on your terminal, right? You basically say Java and your class name, the program executes and you get hello world. Node.js does exact same thing for JavaScript code, right? Can we go to next slide? And since they were basically intending Node.js to be used by web developers, right? They made it extremely easy, and I'll emphasize this: it's extremely easy to create a web server in Node.js, right? What you see, I'm not going to get into details of these lines, what code is present over here on your screen. But the point is, you only need to write this much to create a web server, working web server. You don't need any other technology like PHP to enable or serve this on internet. You just need to write these 10 lines of code. If you take out the comments, it's much less lines. And it could actually be written, all of this could be written in one line to one statement, right? To create a web server. And that can be a very powerful tool. That can be enabler for web development. Just knowing JS, you will be able to work across the stack. You'll be able to work on front end as well as back end in web development. Right? Can we go to the next slide? Okay. So that will hold off there on the technologies that we use for web development, right? And we'll quickly touch upon the tools that we use, right? The
1 minute, Shashi. Yeah. Having said that, it is pretty easy to use JavaScript, right? You saw that like how within 2 lines we can make client requesting the server. In just 3-4 lines we can make the server itself, how it can respond back to the client. So like we'll go into much deeper, but that in the next subsequent webinars. For the current introductory webinars, we'll go ahead with more insights about the development and the tech relevant to this your day-to-day task. Okay, yeah, that's it.
Thanks, Kapil. Yes. All right. So there are two things that I'd highlight that we use in day-to-day development, right? When I do my job at the company that I work with, right? Or a couple or any other developer, any other web developer that does the job, does their normal web development, right? They will need these two tools, right? One is IDEs. IDEs are like text editors. They are much more advanced version of Notepad. You could think of them like that, but they make the development much more easier for you by adding auto completion for some of the code, or by making it much easier to run your program or debug your program in place, right, without having to leave your notepad and jumping to a terminal, command prompt, whatever you call it, right? All that could be integrated into one single program that will serve as a wholesome development environment for you, right? There are quite a few ideas on market today, and each one has its own charms. Each one has its own benefits, and depending on what language you do the development in, you could choose one or the other among these. Okay, some of these could be applicable or available for multiple languages too, but almost always each one is suited for a particular language or particular type of development, right? VS Code is Visual Studio Code. It's a tool by Microsoft, which is very well suited for JavaScript development. And when I say JavaScript, I also mean TypeScript and other related technologies, right? Visual Studio Code works very well for JavaScript. Almost everyone who uses JavaScript, who develops in JavaScript, ends up using Visual Studio Code as their primary development environment. That said, you could write code in any language in VS Code. There's no restriction. Just that it was like when the developers were developing VS Code, right? They were thinking about JS, so it works best over there. Same goes for Eclipse. Eclipse is best for Java. PyCharm is best for Python development. IntelliJ is like under VS Code, kind of general purpose. You could use it for Java or JS or any other programming language that you want to. Um, but yeah, it's more popular among the Java developers than JS developers, even though it's more general purpose. Right. So that's about IDEs. Git is a tool for managing your code. Now, when we are students, Git, we might fail to see what Git brings to the table. It might not look relevant enough. But Git is extremely important when your code base grows, right? It's very important, and when multiple people are writing code or contributing code to same code base, it's very important to keep track of what changes are being done, right? It's very important to be able to go back to a previous change, go back to a previous version of your code without breaking your head, right? And Git makes all that extremely easy for you, right? And it also helps you save your code in cloud, in on some server. We have not introduced cloud, so let's leave that terminology out for now. But Git will basically help save your code outside your computer, so that even if your computer crashes, you'll still have access to your code and all the history that the code contains. Like uh, on first day you could have added one simple functionality to your code. On the second day someone else could have added one more functionality, and then so on and so forth, right? With Git you'll be able to always see the history and know that who added what functionality to your code, and if something doesn't work you'll be able to go back to an older version, right? There are a couple of providers for this Git. One is called GitHub, other one is GitLab, Bitbucket. All of them kind of provide the same functionality with different look and feel. You can choose any one that you want. But all of them effectively let you save the history of your code, how your code has reached its current state, right? And they let you save all this information on the internet, on some server, and all that for free, right? So yeah, do look up Git if you are not already using it. It's a very important tool that almost all companies across the world use. Okay, can we move to next slide? And with this, I'll actually hand over to Kapil, and he'll talk about the workplace process.
Yeah. Thank you, Shashi. Having said that, Git allows you to recover your, deleted files or the files like the previous versions. The best point is like today, whatever softwares we told you, almost are open source. By open source, it means like they are free, they are open to everyone. Actually, if you want to, add some more functionality, if you look that okay, VS Code should have this functionality, right? You can definitely go to their GitHub site and you can raise a PR pull request suggesting that okay, we have this option, we can I saw this option somewhere else or somewhere in different platforms, I just wanted it to be added here. Since it is open source, the people who are taking care of the maintaining those webs that GitHub repository, they will take care of your PR. In case if it they say that okay, they see it is feasible, they will definitely work on that. So see, open source is like open for everyone, it's free also, but you can add to that software as well. So that's all about the the web development technologies and the day-to-day softwares everyone uses across the globe in this web development industry. Now let's talk about how this real-time projects looks like how do we work on this kind of big projects at our workplace. So for that, you might have heard about SDLC. I think if you are in second year or third year or any year in the college, you might have heard by now what is SDLC. It's like software development life cycle. So basically, what is software development life cycle is, if you see today, every industry, every business, irrespective of their domains, they all have one phase, and what's that phase is a website or the mobile apps. So that is their front face to the world, to the entire world. If they want to communicate, if they want to approach that company or business, they all have their website. So in that case, if it is that much important and it's a key ingredient to all businesses as of 2020, then there has to be some process, right? Some process to develop those softwares. Since if you go to WhatsApp or Facebook, they are used by billions of people. If you go to Play Store, if you see, there's some billions downloads of WhatsApp. So you can imagine the scale at which those website or those softwares are working. So for that, and maintaining that big website or repository, there has to be some process, right? So SDLC is one kind of that process for the web developers or all kind of developers. It is irrespective of the web development. We have to see this. So there are various types of models we have for SDLC. One is the waterfall, which is like pretty old, and I think no one uses it now. Agile is kind of current one, which is used by almost all companies. Agile actually gives you that freedom to, you can basically they have sprints, or either you can have Kanban as well. So sprints means like they have 15 days of time. Okay, suppose new epic came. New epic means suppose one set of new task or tickets came to your team. Okay, so we want these 5 pages to be developed, and these 5 pages required like this design or this pop-up. One has one button, one has search bar, one has this footer, header, whatever they want, respective to their business. So you have to divide those into sprints usually of 15 days or 1 month also. Kanban board, if you follow, it's like this the literal Kanban board. You have your task, you have to decide your time, you can like move once from one section to one section, like okay, green side is done, red side is like yet to be done, orange is like almost, like that what we have. So this is the usual process we all follow in almost all companies. Either they follow sprint or Kanban, or either they call them a task or tickets, whatever. But there's a SDLC, what we are talking about is remains same across the companies or frameworks. So then suppose you got that epic, it consists of 5 tickets. We have in our team, we have 3 developers or 4 developers, suppose. So we have to divide among ourselves those tickets, right? Suppose I am a one developer among that team. I pick one task or one ticket, right? Then what? Then it's my duty to code. Like suppose I have to add that page, I have to bring that data, suppose from backend. I have to consume some microservices for that, bringing up that data. I need to design that button or web page, something like that. So all that I have to write. Being a web developer or any developer, it's my duty to write the code for that task. Then the next phase is testing. As you know, testing is altogether a different job as well, but there are lots of testing. We have QA purposefully for that purpose, but now for the code, for the developers, we have unit testing. Unit testing is like whatever functions you have written or modules or methods you have written, you have to write unit test cases as well for that code. Suppose I have written one function which takes input as a number and which process that, and respect, like with a respect to that business, it returns some output. So for that function which I have written, suppose I have written in Angular, irrespective of Angular, I have to write that in Jasmine and Karma test runner we use. So in Jasmine framework, we have to write the unit test also for that block of code. Now, okay, by now I got the ticket, I gathered the requirements, I have written the actual code, I have written the test case as well, and it's working fine. Now it's my role is to raise the pull request. Raise the pull request is like the same, we go ahead to the Git is as he already mentioned that it's a version control system for our code. And respect to that, we have different distributor systems like GitHub, GitLab, or Bitbucket. So Git, suppose we have GitHub, right? Then we have to raise pull request from GitHub. We have to go to GitHub repository, our repository. We have to select our branch, and we need to click the button on raise pull request. Now what will be happening next is this pull request will be raised on the repository, and it will be like all developers in your team will be getting notified, or all the stakeholders which is responsible for this repository, your page, your team leaders or project managers, they will be notified that okay, this developer has raised a pull request. That means he has completed his task, he has written the code, he has completed the unit test as well. Now we have to review. So PR review is also essential part, like you need to review others ticket as well. Okay, what kind of code they have written, is it worth the flow, is it working fine, is it getting is it taking care of all the boundary conditions? You have to check that it is taking care of all the good practices. So like that, the next process is PR. And at the end, like CI/CD, again we have different set of developers, like DevOps people we call them. They take care of this continuous integration and continuous deployments. So that's how it's a general process at our workplace we follow, starting from the as like all the versions of SDLC. If you see, requirement gathering, development, unit testing, design, analysis, everything we follow. Yeah, that's it. Next slide. Yeah, so let me wrap it up quickly. Like we already spoke a lot about these technologies. So what are the technology stacks? So today, if you see, we have mean stack, MERN stack. They are very a couple of famous tech stacks. So what exactly is a stack? Is suppose if you talk about full stack. Full stack comprises of three layers. One is like client side, if you can see, which is like the presentation. Then the backend side, the business layer, and the database side. So all this comprises of the full stack. Suppose if I say that I am working as a full stack developer, that means I have to know front end, that means basic HTML, CSS, and any language, suppose JS or Angular framework or React. If I am saying that I'm full stack, that means I have to know backend technologies also. It could be Node, it could be Go, it could be Python, it could be Java or JavaScript, like I said. Database also side, I need to know this SQL or some ODM or ORM softwares. Now, what is this mean stack? Mean, if you say mean is an acronym, it stands for MongoDB, E Express, A Angular, and Node. Similarly, if you replace Angular with R, it's MERN stack. So it's all about, it's a full stack JavaScript developer if you say with these two stacks. Now, if you talk about LAMP, it is using L for Linux, A for Apache HTTP, M for MySQL database, P is for PHP. So this is different, like it's a stack. It will also allows you to develop full stack web pages, but it consists of different technology stacks. Now the latest which I heard recently is Jam. I think you might not have heard of it. It's like JavaScript APIs and markups. So nowadays, if you see, for all businesses, for all purpose, you have APIs available. Either they are public or they want some money, like in the pro mode. But all APIs are available. If you go for news, right, news APIs are already available. So the backend work has been already done. You just need to know JavaScript. You need to know how you consume those APIs in the front end. And you just know little markup for the HTML and front end. You can build up any application. Suppose if you want to build your own website, you can definitely, if you have the fine API or backend, you can consume that and you can build your own website. So that kind of tech stack, it's like combines front end, back end, database, and everything. So stack is like collection of different technologies which will allow you to develop the complete product. Yeah, that's it. Now let's talk about some study and preparation tips. Okay, so if you guys are in college or recent graduate and looking for jobs, I think these points will definitely help you. You have to plan first, like what are the technologies you need to learn, because if you go today, we have hundreds of technologies and all of them are evolving. If you know JavaScript, 5 years back JavaScript has totally changed in 5 years later. At that time it was ES5, now is ES 2020. So it's like 5 years, 5 different set of functionalities has been added to JavaScript. Now if you write normal functions and not arrow functions, people will definitely write in your PR comments, okay, why don't you use functions, arrow functions now? So if you go ahead, you have to decide what all the set of technologies you need to use. That is the reason we have added all kind of stacks and languages and frameworks in this introductory webinar. Then you have to schedule that, okay, I have to take 1 month for JavaScript, one week for HTML and CSS. Like you have to plan and schedule. Then you have to study hard. Like it's not about just going through some websites or reading 5 or 10 points for HTML CSS, that's it. No, you have to do the actual practice. And the best point of learning, the best thing, like when while you can learn anything, is like making small projects. You can make any demo projects. Suppose if I tell you today, okay, just make one slideshow of images you can get randomly from anywhere. You just pick 10 images and try to make the slideshow. That is how you will learn HTML, CSS and JavaScript all, because it combines all these. It's a pretty simple. You can create my profile form. Suppose you go to Facebook or any other website, right? They all have my profile page. You can just copy that design, how they have text box, drop down, search bar, whatever, like you have images, you can that. So while using this, you will be able to learn the fundamentals of web development. What exactly is these three pillars which I talked about. Then the best point is learning and sharing. Yeah, okay, if that is the best practice. If you learn whatever new today, you can definitely go to your friends or colleagues, you through WhatsApp group, through social media accounts, you can definitely share that. And let me tell you that people will definitely appreciate that, because everybody loves to know the new concepts. If you know, if you have 5 people in your team or 10 peoples, right, if they all come up with one new thing daily, at the end of 1 month you will be all having hundreds of new concept, new functionalities that will make you a matured and a complete developer. Then let me tell you that you can definitely make use of social media. Social medias are not just meant for the fun purpose, sharing memes, watching videos and connecting to your colleagues. It's not only meant for that. You can definitely join very good groups in social media. Like you can follow pages in Instagram, they are teaching like anything. If you want any topic, these are the basics one. If you want to learn machine learning, deep learning, you can definitely follow some good pages. You can join Facebook groups. You can follow some dev advocates, GD, like Google developer experts, Microsoft valuable professionals. These folks are readily available on Twitter. You can definitely follow them and you can learn them, like how they write the posts daily on their social media accounts. You will definitely get to learn a lot of concepts and new things. And I think with all that it comes the motivation also, that that guy can do, then even I can do. So like this, if you follow these, all are the just general suggestions from our side. And at the end, like I said, like you can exactly support this open source ecosystem. That is the best way to learn. So this all is like about the general tips. I think next, yeah. So that is all. Like this is just a end slide where we are going to share some interview questions to you guys. We are not going to answer all this. We want you to read all these questions and just search on the internet and try to see that how much extent you can get the answers, or if you get the answer, how much extent you can understand. Because these all are the, like, it is the finest curated list I have prepared from my experience for this web development and app development, everything. So you will be definitely asked 5 of these 10 questions in each and every interview if you go as a web developer today. Well, yeah, so that's pretty much it for today's webinar. I think, yeah, so you have Let me see that if we have any questions, or if you are looking for any questions, you can definitely post on respective channels. We'll pick those questions and we'll be happy to respond on those questions. And I extremely apologize for the delay. I think we have started 10 minutes later, but it's like 20 minutes now. So okay, 10 minutes we have crossed, but it is okay.
Thank you, Kapil sir, and thank you, Sashi sir, for this very informative session. It was a very helpful session and useful, and we are looking forward to all the sessions coming up in this line. So, for any queries, we are all live here. You can post any queries that you have in the chat, in the comment section, and the speakers are here to answer them. Also, we are gonna play the slides from start to end for the next 5 to 10 minutes. After which we'll have our quiz, and the people who will qualify this quiz will get the respectful certificates. So, can we run the slides, please? For any questions, please reach us in the comment section.
AFC. No, no, automation will not end front-end jobs. And I can say that with very high confidence because it has not, right? We deal with issues every single day that I know for a fact that could not be solved by machines yet. Like, maybe in 2050, 2070, someday we will have AI systems that could do some of the job that humans are doing right now. But that's not going to be end of web developers because there are so many other things that only humans can do. Web development, at least the front end part of it. Actually, you mentioned front end jobs. I'm kind of surprised about that. Front end development, front end is an artistic venture, from what I think of it, right? And art is something that machines will never be able to master. How a website should look like, and what works for the customer, what does not work for customer. This is something that will always require human involvement, right? Even from a more general perspective, right? Web development is not going away anytime soon because Wix or any other such automation tool, WordPress, is another one, right, came along simply because all those are very generalized things. They might be good to start up a business very quickly, but when you try to specialize your business, right, when you are trying to kind of position yourself as unique in the market, right, you'd want a unique experience for your customers, and at that point you'd want to hire a web developer to create that unique experience that suits you, your business, and your customers, right? And for that simple reason, web development will always be there. Kapil, you want to add something? Kapil, you're on mute. Yeah.
Yeah. To add to that answer, yeah, it's definitely not going to end at least for next 10 to 20 years, because I understand the way AI and machine learnings are progressing and bringing the new advancement. But see, the machine can't think creative, you can say. Suppose it is like, see, they are just mimicking, they are just trying to mimic the human brain. So it can be taught in the way, the simple one line. Suppose if you say human brain, it can think in different perspective at the same time, right? But machine can't. Machine, if you give one command, it will do that. If you write console log, it will just do console. That's it. If you ask it to design like this, the design one single line or straight line, it will do just make a straight line. So as of now, I don't see any way to, like, yeah, if see that this issue, this thread comes to the different segment of business. If you say these robots are gonna take the place of normal workers, so I can say that, yeah, maybe like 50% to, or to the extent of 40%, yeah. But the creative side, if you see whatever creative work or task you pick, it will be very hard for AI to cover up that. So you need not to worry about that automation. Maybe suppose, if okay, if you're saying that, okay, automation will end the jobs, what about the automation? You have to write program for automation, right? Then you can become that automation code developer. So this will be going on for like unforeseeable future. I can't
Forever.
predict anything.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this has happened before in cars business, like when the first cars were created by Ford and all, right? At that time, when the automation came in, when the assembly line came in, people thought that jobs will be gone completely. Like all the cars will only be made by machines. There will be no job for humans in a car factory. That's absolutely not true today. Most of
Yeah.
the jobs are done by machines, but still there is job for human to maintain those machines, to build those machines, and that's how it will be with web dev also.
Another questions, I got this with GPT-3 coming up. What do you mean by GPT-3? I don't understand.
I think that's continuation of the first one. GPT-3.
Other question is like, should I go for Python if I know PHP? Okay, so let me take this question. See, it's all about, like, as we shown you in the all slides, it doesn't matter that what technology you uses. If you are targeting front end, or sorry, web development at its core, then at the end you have to learn JavaScript. There is no way. If you going for Python or PHP, at the end they all convert the end output, or the end chunks. If you see in the browser, right, your network tabs or other tabs, you will definitely see .js extensions files only. So if your questions is regarding web development, I think PHP is better than Python. I know that using Flask and Django, you can create websites using Python, but I don't see. But yeah, if you're looking for overall programming languages, I think Python is one of the best. If you learn Python, it will be easier for you for data science jobs, for machine learning, for artificial intelligence, for everything. But it is not that feasible and popular among the web developers or mobile app developers.
Yeah, I totally echo Kapil's words over there. If you want to learn a programming language, Python is amazing. If your aim is to develop a website, and if you're asking, should I learn Python to develop this website? No, you already know PHP. Just go ahead and develop that website, right?
Exactly.
JS, yes, you'll absolutely need to learn JS, and after that, at some point, you could decide that, yeah, I want to write the server-side code also in JS using Node.js, and that's fair enough. But learning a new language just for creating website is most probably not required.
So guys, I have capped that. I have put that link of quiz in the comment section on YouTube. I think you can go through those questions, and if you would like to answer them, you can probably go ahead.
Yeah. So if you have more questions, you can always type in your comments. And just in case you come up with questions after the session has ended, right? Feel free to reach out to Kapil or me. Our LinkedIn profiles are there in the last slide.
Yeah, I have shared my Twitter and LinkedIn. Yeah, so these pages you can see. You can definitely ping us every anytime. I think we have another questions. Shashi, you want to take that? It is Node.js versus Django, which is more beneficial in 2020. Okay.
Okay, fair question. And I'll take it in a different manner. I'll rephrase your question like, should I use Node.js or should I use Django? And there's a very, very simple way to decide that. Which language do you know? Do you know JS or do you know Python? If you already know Python, go for Django. it's just the same thing as I mentioned in previous one, right? If you already know a language, you should not try to learn a new language because you'll still be beginner at the other language that you learn, and you'd most probably end up writing suboptimal code. So there's no point learning a new language to go for while you're developing a website, right? But in general, whether Node.js is better or Django is better, Node.js is more popular. Node.js has more library support, more libraries for various things that you want to do in as a web developer. And Node.js will most probably help you get more support on sites like Stack Overflow or from people like us, right? Simply because JavaScript is common between front end and back end. And as I said, people want to learn as little as possible and be able to do as much as possible with their knowledge, right? So for that reason, Node.js has become extremely popular, and it's overall easier to develop a website with Node.js today. That does not take anything away from Django, though. If you already know Python, Django is a fair enough program framework to use, right? And as a matter of fact, Express, a very popular library used on Node.js, could even be termed framework kind of, it derives inspiration from Django. So yeah, both of them are good in their own rights. But if you're trying to learn a new one, I'd suggest Node.js.
Absolutely. Do we have any more questions now? I don't think so. I think it's the right time now to wrap it up.
Thank you for the session, sir. It has been a great session, and hopefully everybody participating in the session have enjoyed it thoroughly. And we are looking forward for the rest of the 4 sessions in the series. Hopefully, we'll enjoy that too, and we'll learn a lot out of it. And to all the participants, do participate in the quiz. Best of luck for the quizzes, and pass them and get certificates. And we'll meet you all in the next session. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. And it's been indeed a pleasure interacting with you guys. I hope you find it fruitful and bring up more birdies in the next upcoming sessions. I'm super excited to see you all in the upcoming sessions. Yeah. Bye bye.
Thanks everyone. Bye bye. See you soon.
This is from us from today. We'll see you soon.